Hey, how's everybody doing? Hoping you're having a fantastic day. So, I actually just wanted to briefly mention something that I've been recently reading. I've been reading a lot about the doctrine of God. That's kind of been my main point of study over the last, I'd say, 9 months to a year. Just been reading a lot of books, classic Thomistic books on the doctrine of God. And really, I think I've found what I think is the best sort of introductory work, because there's a lot of very good works out there. Obviously, primarily is St. Thomas's tract in the Summa de Deo Una, which is questions 2 through 26. But that obviously can be a bit difficult to read and can have some lack of emphasis that unless one has a teacher who is sort of bringing these things out, it can cause some difficulties. It doesn't mention as much about the existence of God than we would like now with the post atheist environment, where we would like to read a little bit more about that. But I've found a book. It's actually very, very good on this. It's in English, obviously, and it's Providence by Garrigou-Lagrange. I always was under the impression, because I'd never read Providence by Garrigou-Lagrange, I was under the impression that it was some sort of devotional book, because that's actually how he phrases it, that he's writing this devotional reflection on providence. But in the first 150 pages, so parts 1 and 2, he sets down what he calls the theological foundations for the discussion of providence. And come to find out, I was reading it the other week. Well, I think last week I was reading it. And I read through parts 1 and 2, and come to find out, it's basically just a very lucid, sapiential, I guess is the best word of putting it, and devotional introduction to the Catholic doctrine of God, specifically St. Thomas's teaching on the matter. And it's very, very, very good. So he begins in the first 70, 80 page, well, I guess first 64 pages technically, with some discussions on the existence of God. But what he does really specially here, and I really, really like it, what he does here is, yes, he mentions the argument from the contingency of being, which are going to be the first three of St. Thomas's Way. And then he mentions the order in the universe, which is going to be the fifth way. But then he takes upon himself a very long discussion of the fourth way, which actually I think the fourth way is the most useful for Catholics, and most are kind of ironically embarrassed by it. But he takes on himself a long discussion of the fourth way in terms of God as supreme truth and sovereign good, and the end of happiness, and then also the ultimate foundation for duty, moral law, basically. But the reason that his discussion of God as supreme truth and supreme and sovereign goodness is so important is this really forms the foundation for a discussion of the divine perfections, which is very, very important. And then he goes on to discuss the nature of God, which kind of forms the nucleus and the terminus. It's the terminus of the proofs of God, and it's the beginning of a discussion of the attributes of God. So we go from proofs to nature to attributes, and he explains this very, very lucidly. Where in something like the Summa, it's implicit in what St. Thomas is saying, and you kind of have to go searching for it. And then he goes on to his discussion of the divine attributes, which is incredible. He's again, it's something which is very devotional. So not only is he explaining the Catholic teaching on this very lucidly, so not treating this as some sort of more or less academic exercise, but it's a scholastic exercise. It's an exercise that's meant to explain that which we believe by faith. So it's very, very good with that. But it's also something which is intimately tied in with Garrigou's devotional emphases, I guess is the best way of putting it. So when he's discussing divine simplicity, he's making some very good spiritual applications for the doctrine of divine simplicity when it comes to the simplicity of the spiritual life, which resolves within itself seemingly contradictory virtues, which is very interesting. And also infinity, immensity, eternity. So he goes through all of what are called the entitative attributes, so the attributes of entity. It's in other places called quiescent attributes, but he discusses that very succinctly. Again, all this is very succinct. And then he goes into a discussion of the divine incomprehensibility, which traditionally is called the attributes of passive knowability. And then lastly, goes into the so-called operative attributes of God, more so focusing on the wisdom and love of God, which are going to form the perfections of God's will and intellect. And these are again very, very important. So he's covering everything that's discussed in De Deo Uno, that is in on the one God, which is discussed in question 2 through 26 in prima pars of the Summa Theologica. So it's a very comprehensive discussion that's succinct, it's devotional, and it's sapiential, it's scholastic in the best way. So I just wanted to have this quick stream where I tell you all you guys that if you want to work and you're interested in this field, definitely pick that up. I put the links below. And if you enjoyed this video, definitely consider becoming a patron at patreon.com/militant Thomist. God bless.